I think one of the things that guys really go through is they think that they are the only one going through something. And it comes from all different messages that we're receiving. And we're kind of, hey, am I supposed to just be a lone wolf, put my head down, go out, grind, work, and then just keep it all in because I'm supposed to be a strong type of a figure? And so that we're receiving all these messages. And so I think that leads to guys thinking that they're the only one going through whatever it is they're going through.
Hello, and welcome back to the Connected Mindset Live. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk. Such a pleasure to have you here, whether you're a first-time listener or joining us for a recurring episode. This is going to be one of those connected episodes that I really cherish and look forward to. I'm feeling a little extra connected this morning for a number of reasons, and you'll be able to hear through this episode some of those reasons here. But one of the episodes we put on last week was the 10 connected lessons that we've learned from interviewing hundreds of world leaders. And I want everybody to go back and listen to that. That's a compilation of over 33 episodes on the Connected Mindset Live, all the interviews I've done on the business side of things, and really things you can take away to feel more connected with the world around you. So looking forward to that. Without further ado, Mr. Kyle Depiesse, pleasure to have you on the show. How's the morning going?
It's going good, Greg. Like I was saying earlier, we've coordinated our shirts, and so I think today's going to be a good day, man. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You got it. We're welcome to have you, and looking forward to diving in here. So, Kyle, in order for the audience to understand the person sitting in front of us today, what do we need to understand about the younger you that got you to this point?
The younger me, born and raised in a small town in southeast Wisconsin called Random Lake. And so I had a really good upbringing. My father was a hardworking blue collar guy. He's a carpenter, and he did that for almost 50 years of his life. And my mom worked part-time while we were growing up. And I have an older brother and a younger brother. So I'm the misfit in the middle. I don't know if anyone is a middle child or a second born, but I fit the stereotype there, man. I'm just a bit of a spitfire sometimes. And so played sports in high school, and, something that maybe we share in common, and, what I loved about sports. And I went to a really small high school. So in fall, it was soccer, and in the winter, it was basketball. In the spring, either golf or track. And in the summer, it was baseball. So I had to play all of them, in a small school. But I missed, and if I look back on that time, I miss camaraderie. And I think when I talk to a lot of guys and gals, anyone who plays sports or some sort of team event, they miss camaraderie. And that's a really important thread that kind of comes back in the work that I'm doing now. But as a young guy, playing sports, being really active, had a great household that I grew up in. I consider myself really lucky. And it's something that, with being married now, I'm a husband, I'm a father. As we were talking earlier, I've got a 7-year-old. His name is Cal, short for Callahan. Not from Cal Ripken Jr., but that is we do love the name Callahan, some Irish roots. But that's kind of how I put the orders of life for me, Greg. It's I'm a husband first, I'm a father, and then I'm an entrepreneur. And I think that's really important. That's the world that we want to create, and the household that we want to create for our family here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the prioritization aspect. That's been huge for me when I was getting out of baseball, and my identity was baseball player, and that's obviously I had other things going on. My parents, my loved ones. The people I cared about, my kids, but I always felt like I had to put baseball first because that's where the money was coming from to allow me to support those individuals. And until I completely flipped the script and said, my health is important, tending to them and their time and their needs, and then being an entrepreneur, being a baseball player. And once I did that, it made everything open up. My heart opened up. My ability to give them better feelings opened up, because when I was with them, I wasn't just focused on what do I need to do next for baseball or as an entrepreneur. And that distracted me and made me not present. And it was not a good result. And I needed kind of a fire lit under me for somebody to tell me that. And I think, that's some of the things we'll talk about is sometimes you need people around you that can call you out,
Yep.
and hold you accountable for the things that you need to do, but still aren't doing it, and they can see it, which I think is extremely important. And you mentioned something that has been, sitting on my heart recently, which is a lot of us want in companies, we don't get that camaraderie, right? In sports, we were all on a common mission. Obviously, we wanted to win the game, but we were about the camaraderie and the process of going through it. I think what I see in business a lot today is it's always the sign of win a championship, not necessarily be a champion. Like, be a good person, be an accountable, responsible person to your family, and then you bring that to the business world, and that makes you, a good business, a good culture from that standpoint. So I think that's huge. Where were your kind of, ups and downs? I guess, I know you went through corporate America. What kind of brought you to the work that you're doing today with folks? And what did that process look like?
Yeah, you mentioned corporate America. So I had 13 years in corporate America, and probably similar to many people climbing the corporate ladder, and all throughout the process, like, I'm defining success as just a very individual type of an endeavor. It's a very self-centered version of success. And that was kind of my North Star. And it really brought me to a place of feeling incredibly lost, very confused, because I get towards the top of the ladder and I look around and I'm like, man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. It's lonely as well. And so after 13 years, I really got burned out. And I think most people could probably relate to that. And I left corporate America and I became a high school business teacher. So I took a very different pivot in my life. I took a massive pay cut as well. And I loved it though. I really enjoyed it, because what really makes me tick is uncovering the process of learning for people. And in adult learning, it's not too dissimilar from learning in a classroom. I think the best way we learn is by doing. It's kind of an active learning model, learn by doing, experiential learning. There's different phrases for it. Um, that's the way we learn. We don't learn by someone sitting in front of us in a classroom and just lecturing to us, and we can all remember our days in high school or college and listening to a lecturer day in and day out, and it just doesn't work. But what I found is a lot of learning looks like that. And so I was on a corporate, executive corporate career path. And so I would get sent to a lot of leadership conferences. And then I just took an interest in personal growth as well. And so they all look the same. You go to a Marriott hotel conference room and you're stuck with hundreds or thousands of people. You got a lanyard name tag on, you don't know anybody. And, for 2.5 days, it's guest speaker after guest speaker, 8 a.m. when the breakfast buffet starts until the evening. And you're like, man, like, I don't learn this way.
Yeah.
And so I always found myself sitting in the back and I'm introverted. And I don't love those environments to begin with, but I just don't learn well either in that environment. So I would leave. I'd kind of exit out the back door, and depending on where the conference was held, I would go surf or go golf or go hike or just go move my body. And what I found is that there's other people that were doing the same thing as me. And they were just leaving because they're like, I don't learn this way. This is boring. Like, I just want to get out and move. And so in 2019, after leaving teaching in 2019, I had this idea. And now at this time, I'm a stay-at-home dad. So I left corporate America after 13 years. I taught for 2 years. And then I took the ultimate promotion to a stay-at-home dad in 2017. So in 2019, I just had this idea. I said, hey, what if I flip the learning model on its head? And instead of hundreds of thousands of people, what about 12? And instead of a Marriott conference hotel room, what about the great outdoors? And I will design 48 hours of learning. And I put it out to my network, and I had people show up to the event on the North Shore of Minnesota. But what was unique here, Greg, and I'll kind of stop shortly, is that all guys showed up to that first retreat or experience, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
And I just listened, and it was really obvious to me that guys don't have a really good space or place to talk about life, like what's going on at home, like where they're struggling at work, being a father, like what they're navigating through in this season. They don't have a place to talk about that. We have plenty of invitations to go get wings or pizza or beer and watch a
Mhm.
football game, but like that's it. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to keep doing this. And fast forward to today, the brand is called Guys Trip, and we've done, coming up on 20 of them. We've been international all over the U.S. And it's just a place for guys to rediscover or maybe discover that sense of camaraderie and to have meaningful conversations. And we're having a lot of fun. And I think that's kind of what it's all about. There's plenty of masterminds and conferences and conventions to learn how to grow your business, but we kind of offer two trips at one time, like a bucket list trip that you really want, but the trip that's inward to help discover who you are, and that's the second invitation, the two trips in one.
Mhm. Excellent. Man, a lot there, a lot of powerful stuff to unpack.
Hmm.
One of the things I heard recently is, and I found this with myself because I was a very shy, quiet kid because I really loved listening. And what I found is that I wasn't around the right environments or people, and that made me introverted because it made me feel a certain way where,
Yeah.
I wasn't around people who were giving into me and I was giving into them. And I found when I got into the right environments, had the right people around me, like I never wanted to stop the conversation. And they were like, "Greg, are you now extroverted? I thought you were introverted." And it's one of those things where you look back at the time clock, it's 1 a.m. in the morning, and you're like, "Hey, we could go for another 6 hours because
Yeah.
this is the best conversations we've ever had." And
Yeah.
that's a big part of connection to me, finding those right people and building that camaraderie. I think that's incredible. And that I can tell one of your superpowers is compassionate listening. As you mentioned, the first event, a lot of us have a pull to overlead it. Like we're like, "Hey, we're going to do this. This is what you guys need. Here's my step-by-step process. And,
Yeah.
you have to follow it or else." And the fact that you listen to it, I think has really propelled you to build this, this great organization, this great thing that really has the glue for people internally, but I'm sure the connections externally, because that internal work's taking place, are just amazing
Yeah.
and really supercharge people in their business, even though you may not even be talking about business. I found that in my own life. Once I did the hard work internally, my business just grew.
Yeah.
Not even that I put a new business strategy in or anything of that nature. It's the same business, just different Greg.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a saying that says behind every business problem is a personal problem. And we're often in our own way. And to the point that you said, I think that there isn't really anything special in my programming or design, but it's the beauty of the invitation for space. And when you allow for open space and liminal spaces and slow down your life and your activities and your day and eliminate distractions, man, it's beautiful what can bubble up to the surface. So
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes guys come to these events and they think that they want to work on something and they think they want to have these conversations, but they often leave with something completely different. And it's just a matter of kind of creating an opportunity for people just to slow down. Like we live in such a busy world, and that's kind of what I found. And you're right. I mean, the magic is in the margin for me. I don't jam pack agendas. Like as a teacher, I was thinking, okay, every 10, 12 minutes, like we got to do something different.
Yeah.
And so the challenge for me was like, nope, we got like give so much margin for people just to sit in and soak it all up and have conversations. And people aren't there for listening to me and listening to some sort of keynote presentation. They're there for other things. And I think it's just knowing my role.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's powerful because we grow in silence. A lot of us, because if we're hearing too many noises externally, or we're craving too much externally, which to me is like the expectation of what you're supposed to receive, whether that's visually, auditory, feeling wise, all the above, or what experience you're supposed to get, walking through the woods or we have these expectations that come into us externally, and it prevents us from ever hearing what's actually going on internally,
Yep.
which I think is a huge part of our own processing that needs to take place. And that's kind of like what I consider depression, when we're depressing down that internal self-discovery voice because of all the things we're expecting from the outside world. So I think that's huge. Did you have any events, structures when you were going out to start, this before the first event, to say this is something that may work? Or did you I know you mentioned like flipping the learning model, which I think a lot of education institutions are starting to kind of see the experimental learning piece. But it wasn't out there at that point. Did you have something that you looked to and said, this is a cool model that I may be able to take good and bad from? I guess besides the conferences and all the all the
Yeah.
success of that.
No, I think it was kind of born to be antithetical to all the things that is like, I wish it was done a different way.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's a really unique and interesting question to ask yourself is, how would I like to see this done differently, or in what way could I make this different? And for me, it was a combination of allowing me to be a little bit creative, to follow a passion. I love travel. I love adventure. I love those places. Um, and what I needed in my life. I was going through a phase too, where, as I mentioned, left corporate America, became a high school business teacher, and then a stay-at-home dad. There aren't many dudes that I could kind of talk to
Yeah.
and just share like what I'm going through. And so for me, I somewhat created what I needed. And I think that's a really, really neat thing to share. A really good thought is, if you don't see something that you wish was created, or sorry, if you don't see something that you wish that you needed, maybe you should go out and create it. And sometimes you need to build the table and invite others to the table. And so that is guy trip became something that I just desperately needed in my own life.
Yeah, I think those types of breakthroughs are, I think, what really fill us up, and it fills a lot of other people up. That's why I created this show. Was I was going through a difficult time personally, professionally, going through a lot of identity shifts, trying to figure out, what I like to do. And I started having conversations with people, and I would ask them these kind of deeper questions. Some people didn't like it. That meant, we weren't right to
Mhm.
take the conversation forward. But the people that did like it, I always thought, what if I was able to see these conversations from an outsider's view and watch them and be able to kind of digest them, so I could start to hear my own voice talking to me on, what is, for this case, what does belonging mean? What does it look like to come together with people, build camaraderie? Something that I wish I had. So I had to kind of bring it together and create it. And, it's filled me up,
Yeah.
more than most. And, I've had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, this is a unique show. And I'm sure you've gotten that with Guys Trip, where you're like, hey, I've been looking for something like this, but I haven't found that exact formula.
Yeah.
And, you're kind of serving that Kyle, 5-10 years ago. And I'm
Exactly.
sure people are coming on the path and saying, wow, this is, time collapsing, me going through potential pain that I'm going to go through going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible. What have you found that men battle with most when it comes to connecting with themselves?
Hmm. I think one of the things that guys really go through is, they think that they are the only one going through something. And it comes from all different messages that we're receiving. And we're kind of, hey, am I supposed to just be a lone wolf, put my head down, go out, grind, work, and then just keep it all in because I'm supposed to be a strong type of a figure? And so that we're receiving all these messages. And so I think that leads to guys thinking that they're the only one going through whatever it is they're going through. And when they come to a guys trip, one of the things that I do is they all fill out a personal balance sheet. We all know what a professional balance sheet is, but what about a personal balance sheet, your life? So guys come in and they fill out all these different categories and they rate themselves. And then each guy, through the course of a guy's trip, gets a chance to literally stand or sit in front of the group and just share. Like, here's what's going on, and that might be intimidating for guys, so they can just kind of read off their balance sheet. And before you know it, you look around and guys are shaking their heads and they're like, yeah, like that's the same with me. You know what I mean? And they don't realize that until you get guys to put down the walls of vulnerability and share what's going on in life. And then you realize, hey, like Greg's going through the same thing. Now, tomorrow when we are on the second stage of the Inca Trail, like I'm going to go walk next to Greg and we're going to get a chance to talk about this for a while. And I think when you just show guys that there's strength in some vulnerability, you don't need to keep everything in. There's really there's no strength to that. You show guys that they might feel like they're on their own, but we're on this walk together. And that's what Guys Trip literally stands for is I want the brand to be, hey, we're walking through life with you. And may not have the answer for it, but how good does it feel when you can share the burden with other people? How good does it feel when you can multiply the joy with other people? And so that's what the brand is. And our trips now are hiking or walking or some sort of trek, because we literally mean we are walking with you and you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something everybody needs at some point in time, and continuously. It's something I call reintegration. When you go through any type of experience in life that really shifts you, you have to find ways to reintegrate, or you just go back into your patterns. I think 98% of us, 98% of our thoughts are the patterns we've created, and then the other 2% is, what we're trying to get through. So we have to battle that continuously. And if you don't reintegrate with a group or some type of truth in your life through practices and things, then it kind of goes to the wayside. And I think that's something that the personal balance sheet can really help people revisit and then share. I think the biggest thing I've seen in connecting with people on deeper levels and the best relationships were when I was able to share something that I commonly wouldn't share. And then they're like, wow, I went through that same thing. And we went through this together. And it's kind of, checking in on them and building that whole, that's a relationship in the end. Because you find people that care about you enough to tell you the truth. They're not trying to protect you or worried about, is this going to ruin the relationship? It's, I want you to get past this or continue to grow in this direction. And it's pretty cool that you've been able to create the space for those conversations, because they're not going to happen in the business world in a business meeting. They're not going to necessarily happen, if you're out on a couple's date, or they're not going to happen if you're at a coffee shop for your first meeting with somebody. So it needs to be a specific container space that is conducive to that, because people need to feel, that kind of reduction of all of the barriers we put up to try to be this person that we think people want us to be.
Yeah. Well, you said it well. Like, it creates a sticky bond when you go through something together. I mean, I think there's a level of suffering that when we go through suffering shoulder to shoulder as men, number one, that's really powerful. But what I found, there's a flow to it. If you can introduce a little bit of suffering, and I don't love the word, but doing something difficult or hard together. So what we do is during the day, we do something difficult, hard, challenging, maybe a bit of suffering. You grow in your compassion for people. And if I can put Greg through an event or an activity that maybe he's never done before, and now Greg is really uncomfortable because he's having to battle in his head, like, what are these guys going to think about me? Most guys are have some sort of athletic background. What are they going to think about me? Am I going to look like an idiot? And then you do it, and then everyone's like, yeah, man, like, that was awesome. Good. Like, people grow in their compassion, and that's what men need to do. We need to do that together. So you do that during the day, and then at night we come together, kind of like a campfire, camp type of a conversation over a fire, cigars maybe, or bourbon or something. And guys, you just watch the vulnerability come up because we just went through something together. Now I'm seeing Greg through a completely different lens. I have compassion for him. Man, I want to see him win. And to your point, I care enough about him that I'm going to hold him accountable to it, because that's where change actually happens, to your point earlier with reintegration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely shifting. I've had a couple guests on the show talk about the nervous system, and one of the concepts I've linked back to recently is how our ancestors used to sit around a fire, and it was after a long day of whatever they were doing, building huts or going out and hunting or
Hunting.
harvesting, and it was a difficult day where people were separated. They were going to do what they needed to do that day. They would come back and build a fire, and it always was not an easy process to get that fire going, but once it got going, it was kind of a collective appreciation for that ability to build that center point of where people could gather around and be able to relax, have conversations, discuss their day. And I think that is something that kind of healed and recharged them for the next day. And
Mhm.
a lot of us don't get that in today's world, where we're able to really have authentic, clear conversations and get clear feedback. So it just bottles up over time, and that creates disease, in my opinion. It creates health issues. It creates feelings of anger and like resentment in the world, and it's like the world is negative towards me, and
Yep.
if we're not able to get it out, it just just like anything, if you bottle things up too much, eventually it's going to explode. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people get there, especially men, because at least what they say generally is women have the easier time sharing those vulnerabilities, and a lot of men hold it in. I don't think that's true with all women and all men, but
Mm.
just kind of generally, I think that's what I see. And I try to be that person in my group to kind of lead the way of sharing that stuff. So I hope other people will share as well, and it benefits them more than it benefits me hearing it. But I also get some benefit as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Someone's got to go first. I mean, we talked about
yeah,
that earlier too, Greg. Is like that's what a leader does. You extend invitations, you go first. And I think that's really powerful.
yeah, it is. How do you think? One of the things we spoke about previously was friend groups. I think community is important for everybody. As we go through transitions in our lives, I think sometimes we feel like we have to we have to blow up our life to recreate one, and I don't think that's always true. I know going first is definitely the way to lead. What do you think people should consider as they start the business or move to a new place? What does that mean for their past friend groups, past life, and how can they make sure to still cultivate those relationships, even though they may be on a different experience, different path.
Yeah. It's such a good question. This is a delicate topic to navigate around because I want to share what I've learned at the same time understanding and respecting that everyone's situation is probably a little bit different. But I think we could all agree. So I'm coming up on 44 in a week. If I go back 20 years, I'm definitely not the same person. And go back to high school or go back to college, not the same person. Even 5 years ago, not the same person. But a lot of times, we've got friendships that are by default or by proximity. So proximity would just be, my son plays baseball. So what other dads are at the baseball game and you know what I mean? Or coworkers, maybe you just see them a lot. Proximity. Default might be friendships from really young on. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. But what's really important to share is that as you get a little bit older, life situations, seasons, whatever it might be, becoming a father for the first time, getting married the first time, starting a business, and you came from corporate America, you need to be intentional to cultivate new relationships as well. One of the things that guys struggle with the most is they go through some change, they want to grow in their personal or professional life, and they're like, where do I find other people who are doing this? You have to be intentional. That takes effort. Sometimes that means making an investment. I don't know exactly. But those are the three things I wanted to share. And then additionally, what sometimes people hear when they listen to that is they think I need to abandon my friend groups, or they're not serving me anymore, or we've all changed and all we do is talk about college. And I understand that rhetoric and that sentiment. But to what you and I were sharing earlier, people follow good examples. And if you're taking your life and you're making positive changes, people are going to see that. Now, some people, it's the crabs in the bucket analogy. They want to pull you back in, pull you back down. But I tend to be more optimistic and think that if you're taking your life and you're moving it in a positive direction, people are going to see that and they're going to say, man, what is Greg doing? And like, maybe I need to be doing some of that too. So if people follow good examples and you're leading your life in a positive way, you're going to inspire some people. And maybe you need to be the guy who says, hey, let's take this friend group that is all college buddies, and when we get together, like all we do is talk about college. Maybe you need to be the guy who changes the channel, so to speak, with conversation. Maybe you need to be the person who creates their own version of that personal balance sheet. And next time you all get together, maybe just change the conversation, take it to a deeper level. I mean, how many times have we seen in friend groups, like we don't talk about anything but fantasy football and different things like that. But what might be going on with your buddy to your left is maybe he's struggling in his marriage and him and his wife have talked about divorce. You don't even know that because no one ever talks about things that matter. So maybe what I want some people to hear is be the person to go first, be the good example, and take some of those friendships and maybe try and take it to a deeper and more meaningful level because someone has to do it. So why not you?
Yeah. Yeah. Why not you? I love that. Yeah. The three types of relationships, I think, is proximity, default, and then kind of similar lifestyles as you build, your life. And I think a balance of all those is healthy. And, I don't think one is, a lot of people run to the similar lifestyle. They're like, you have to be on the same schedule I'm on, in the same place of life with the same amount of kids, or we can't be a good match. And I think having different friends on different paths helps them improve, and hopefully helps you improve as well. And that's where the win-win comes into play. My mind always goes to, how do you open up that conversation? If it's going to be you, I think a lot of us feel that pull to lead it, but it's uncomfortable if you're in the middle of a fantasy football talk and you're like, hey, what's going on in your guys' personal life? Is there anything you're working through? And they're like, oh, they kind of laugh at you. Sometimes it's kind of like, oh, Greg, we're not going that deep today, or something of that nature. And because that's the plane I like to live on. Those are some of the questions I ask, and the friends around me like that because it kind of changes the narrative. But I think a lot of groups I've been in the past, they're like, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to go there and overshare. And I'm like, are we really friends here?
Yeah.
And we care about each other, but do we really? So interested in where your mind goes when you think about how to take that first step when the conversation is all sports, beer, college.
I think giving guys an opportunity to prepare and giving guys the chance to, like, hey, we're getting together on Thursday, whatever it might be, like and you can just share with the guys, like, I've got something that maybe I'd like to talk about that's kind of going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you give guys the chance to be ready for something, like if you just all of a sudden drop that question in, like in the middle of whatever it might be, that probably won't go too well. And so I love the intention, but probably not the best approach. And so I think it's all on preparing maybe guys for, like, hey, I'm going through whatever this thing is, and I just would love I value your opinion, I value your feedback, and I just would love to have a chance to talk about it for a little bit. And you may not even the first time want to ask anyone else to share. And then this is the part where you go first. Like maybe you need to be the first one to display and show some vulnerability. And then you don't ask anyone else to share anything. You just give guys a chance to let that land, let it sit. Probably there's a high likelihood that many guys haven't had conversations like that before. So yeah, I mean, dude, you just prepare yourself. It might be uncomfortable. It might be a little bit clunky, but I mean, if it's the first time trying to do something like that, it's not going to go perfect. That's just kind of not how it works. But I guarantee you going first and you sharing maybe what's happening in your life and being a little bit vulnerable, some guys are going to take that, they're going to sit on it for a little bit, and then be prepared for a day or two later or a week later, you're going to get a message saying, hey, I've been thinking about this and here's some more thoughts, or hey, I really appreciated that you shared that. The reality of the situation is not everyone probably will feel that way. But then that's the point where you now need to make some decisions, like what type of a friend is this, and how much energy and investment of my finite amount of time do I want to pour into this.
Mhm.
But you want to give people the opportunity to take the ride with you. I think that's the message here, is give the invitation to take the ride, to go on the journey with others. Don't assume they don't want to go. Give them an opportunity to take it with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of us, and I've been a person that's done this in the past. It's kind of like, hey, I'm going on this trip. See you guys later. Like, it's not even an open invitation. It's a Greg needs to go cope with this, or Greg needs to go on this trip away.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I wanted to support you, but I don't want to overstep. And I think that's what a lot of us, we are constantly on that line of like, I don't want to overstep. So somebody has to say, I'm going through something, and this is what it looks like for me, what I'm processing. And what I've found in doing that is a lot of times people are like, the last year I've been going through this. I haven't said anything because the forum hasn't been there. And
Yeah.
just imagine if, anybody listening in could get to that person, right when it's starting,
Mhm.
how much less pain they would go through. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we really care about people. A lot of us, feel that in our heart, but we don't know how to take it out and take action on it. And
Yeah.
it can save a lot of pain. It can, expedite growth in many ways, and I think build more healthy, improved mutual relationships that we all want. That's what we want, but sometimes we don't know how to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that great Harvard study that many people have probably seen, where they follow a group of friends throughout decades, and they talk about one of the most important things for a fulfilled and full life is just a sense of being connected to people, relationships. And it's sure relationships with your spouse, but it's relationships with friends as well, is such a underpinning for a beautiful, full, and fulfilling life. So it's worth a little bit of awkwardness. Like, it's worth your intention and your time and maybe your investment. It's worth all these things because it really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to almost own the weirdness, like the
Yeah,
weird
it's a great
feelings,
way to
because
put it.
that's where, when you get on the other side of that, in my experience, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like, wow, that was painful, but I feel like a different person after that 30-minute discussion.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when, each guy's trip you go on, or the guys that are leaving, it's like, it's almost hard to put words to. It's such a feeling in your body. I
Mhm.
say nervous system, soul, like at that level where you just feel so alive.
Yeah.
And if we don't get that, we may be alive up here mentally, we're stimulated by our job, or, our marriage, our kids, things of that nature. But until we get that body feeling,
Mhm.
a lot of us live through our bodies. We live through how we feel, and then that controls how we think. And then that allows us to take action. So I think, those breakthroughs, I know everybody listening in, I know you and I both, we want more of those. So has there been anything from a 20 plus guys trips, going forward, that you've been able to host? Has there been any consistencies that you've learned through those that really give people that feeling, in the middle of it or at the end of it, outside of the, I know the camaraderie is huge, the conversations, nature, anything outside of that?
I, the design of it's important. The design of a little bit of difficult, a little bit of hard things, um, suffering, the coming together at night, I think, is so critical. It's so vital at the end of the day around the fire to have those conversations and to steer them in directions that it's important. The best thing that one of the best things that we've done is to integrate that tool of a personal balance sheet, so it doesn't make it awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to talk about the same thing, so it's not like, it really helps guide the conversation in a way where we're all on the same page, quite literally on a one piece of paper. And that's something that anyone could take and steal it, or take mine, or create your own. um, and then I think, to your point, the integration is so important. So when we leave a guy's trip, at the breakfast, we talk about the final breakfast is, what's one thing that you're going to take and implement into your life? Because we're going to hold you accountable to it. So 30 days after a trip, we'll come together on a Zoom and talk about that. 60 days after a trip, we also come together and talk about it. So you don't get to have a breakthrough of thought on a trip and go home and do nothing about it. you're going to actually implement something. And that's where it's not the sexy part of the trip, but that's the part of the trip that makes the most difference in the lives of guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the on the same page, because everybody's looking at the same structure. A lot
Exactly.
of us, if you think about, if we just came together randomly, with 10, 12 guys, and we're all thinking in a different way of how we're organizing our thoughts, and sometimes that creates confusion of how we connect in an aligned way, congruent way, whatever way you want to put it, where it
Well,
makes sense.
even in a group setting, you're going to have someone who's extroverted. You're going to have someone who's going to try and dominate the conversation. And then you're going to have, guys like me who are introverted, maybe guys like yourself, Greg, who are going to see, man, if I don't say anything, can I get away without saying anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Like, everyone's going to get a chance to talk. And
Mhm.
and that's the cool part, because everyone has something valuable to say. Everyone has a valuable experience to draw upon and share. And no one gets away with just kind of sitting and trying to fly under the radar, or we don't do group think either, because every guy gets a chance to chime in. And I mean, to call someone out and to say something positive that they've seen throughout the course of the last couple of days, and to speak life into a guy speaking life into another guy, it's just rare. And guys get really caught up in that, because it's so uncommon for us to do that. And so that's where the real power is. It's having those conversations, and it's having it in a structured way that everyone participates.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Has there been one guys trip, like one environment that has really stuck out to you, whether it's a country,
Hmm.
a place? Because I'm big on my connection to nature. I really think everything thrives off of each other, from the soil to the grass to the trees to how we feel. When it rains, people are sore. Like, there's energies out there in the ocean, in the ground, in nature, that really shift how our bodies connect to it, which I think also shifts our thoughts, which shifts our actions. Has there been one environment that you've seen that is extremely good for what you're trying to carry out, and then maybe even one that wasn't as good? Maybe it was a little bit colder or a little bit more rainy.
Yeah, the our Inca Trail trip, which was September of 2023, was such
Mhm.
a transformative environment, because you've got, you're walking all day, you're hiking, there's altitude one day. And so you're really being pushed physically. And then at the end of the day, we had kind of imagine like just a tent that fits 12 chairs. Then that's it. Like, it's pretty tight. And that was our dinner tent that the porters would set up. So we would, because we had a pretty well-oiled group, in the sense of they're strong, they're fit. And so we did pretty good with our timing. We got there in good time, where we had an hour and a half each night, to sit down and talk with the group. And it flowed so perfectly. It was an incredible opportunity for breakthroughs to happen during the day. And like I said, you have those side conversations that can really happen as a result of a group sharing. And so that worked out really, really well. We'll likely repeat the Inca Trail, because it was such a great experience. Um, One that didn't work well. Let me think about that. I mean, it's difficult for some of these, because you need the weather to cooperate, and that doesn't always work.
Yeah.
But it does offer the opportunity then to be flexible, and the opportunity to say, you know what, sometimes in life too, things don't go the way you plan it to, and you just got to roll with it. We did a dog sledding trip, which ended up being in March of 2020. So the timing of it was
Wow.
pretty poor. We were up there dog sledding on the days where I think the stock market was just tanking, and we were really distracted. But on top of that, the weather was pretty rough. It was an earlier spring, so things just, I mean, you got weather that doesn't always work out your way. You have external situations and environments and things that are happening that don't always work. Um, and so, yeah, that was a tough one, just kind of given the timing, and on top of that, the weather. But yeah, we've had some like that, and you just do your best. And fortunately, the guys that come are often very open-minded, very just good world-class dudes, and they're just going to roll with it too because they realize, hey, we can't control some things. We're just going to give up control and see what happens for us. So yeah, the dog sledding one was tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. You see the good and the bad. With the bad weather, I think about in athletics, like the best players, like when skills are all the same, the best players are still at their top level even when they're down by 50 points or 10 runs, for example. And there's a mental training to that can really bring people together. It's like, hey, we need to step up and carry the load and do it together. So I can see that it might be a downside from a weather standpoint, but you also get the positives of that, and then vice versa, where everything's comfortable, the weather's 70 and sunny, and there's a lot of good feelings in the air, but you may not be getting that external challenge as much as, and it's kind of that internal battle we go through. So
Yeah, I mean, we've had injuries too. Like I mean, like I said, I'm 44, but sometimes in my head, I think I'm 24.
yeah.
But my body doesn't quite move that way anymore. And so we did like a punt pass kick by Lambeau in Green Bay, and
Mhm.
we had a guy there who was a really decorated running back for Arizona State, and he did something to his hip, and we just have like things like that come up. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you just can't control that stuff, but um, like to your point, when things like that happen, you have an opportunity to say, what are we going to do about this now? Are we going to kind of get down on ourselves and go that route, or are we going to find the beauty in whatever opportunities presented to us?
hmm Yeah, I love the perspective. So rounding things out a little bit, um, where can folks find Guys Trip, and what's the process to get involved in a Guys Trip if anybody listening in wants to join on one?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think the best way is just go to the website, which is guystrip.co. Someone owns guystrip.com and is just holding the domain for an unreasonable price. So I'm not going to buy it, but guystrip.co.
Mhm.
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, just Kyle Depiesse. That's probably the best spot to connect. Instagram as well. And then we have a podcast as well, just called Guys Trip.
Perfect.
In 2024, we've got a Spain trip coming up, the Camino de Santiago. If anyone is familiar with that, it's a pilgrimage, it's a walk, it's a trek, it's a hike, northern Spain. And then I'm going to do a series of meetups. We just did a meetup in Charlotte. And I'll tell you what, do you play pickleball, Greg?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys are really getting into
I
pickleball.
know they are. Yeah.
So we did a pickleball morning, U.S. National Whitewater Center in the afternoon, and then kind of swing some hammers, clean up an old grist mill on a Saturday. So guys can expect to see a handful of just meetups where it's just, hey, get yourself to the location, figure out your own lodging, and here's a loosely planned agenda just to meet other people and connect. So we got one in July in Austin. We're going to wake surf. We're probably going to head out to the East Coast a little bit more your way in Philadelphia, Jersey as well, probably in Q4. And then next year we have a few international opportunities as well. And so I think the best way is just to plug into the brand, see what we're up to, follow along. I love to meet people. You and I met through a mutual contact, and that's usually the way that guys find out about us. And then when the timing is right for people, because we're all busy guys and navigating different things, join in on a meetup or join in on one of our international trips. And that's the way to do it. Most guys that go on the trips are alumni. So about half of them are filled with repeat guys.
Yeah.
So it doesn't leave too many opportunities to join, but that would be the way to do it, is check us out at a meetup and join if you want to.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the format. Kyle, before we get to the final question here, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm curious if there's anything we haven't talked about, anything on your heart that you feel, guys, people listening in today need to hear as you kind of navigate waking up today and coming on the show.
One of the quotes that I really enjoy, and I kind of was resurfaced 2 nights ago on a phone call with some guys, and I'm probably not going to get it 100% correct, but I'll paraphrase. It says, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our standards and habits. And I think for guys listening, it's Friday morning. If you're listening right now, making sure what's important to me is making sure I get my workouts in, making sure I have time for my mental fitness, my spiritual fitness. All those things require our attention if we are going to be the best husband, father, entrepreneur, or business leader that we can be. We have to take care of those habits and really raise the level of our standards first. And so that's kind of how I'm approaching the day today. And as people listen and go about their day, I would just encourage you to maybe consider the same.
Yeah, absolutely. That's powerful. And I think there's a lot of people out there that need to hear that. And I think we need to hear it periodically. So I appreciate you offering that up.
Yeah.
Kyle, one of the reasons we put together this show is helping people better connect with the world around them. And I think Guys Trip is really helping people do that as well. What does connection, in its essence mean to you today as you think about going forward?
The word that sticks with me right now is camaraderie. And I think when we are connected with people, it brings about a sense of camaraderie. It helps us feel that there is a place for us to belong to. And I think the world is really struggling with a sense of belonging. And I think we really have to work to cultivate it. And in a lot of instances, we have to be the one to offer it up and invite others into it. We're all sitting around wishing that we were more connected. You be the one to actually go out and create that connection.
Yeah, I love that. Excellent, Kyle. Thanks so much for joining the show, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for having me.